We Who Are About to Die hit the Steam store about a week back, and when I first saw it I was excited. A single-player roguelike feels like the perfect framework for Roman-inspired gladiator combat, contextualizing its permadeath as a perpetual cycling of new contenders. But when I got to the store page, that excitement was dampened just a bit. The early access banner and floppy streamer bait physics didn't exactly fill me with confidence. I clicked away and moved on with my life, but came back a couple of days later to find a surprisingly positive rating persisting with a decent sample size. I ended up buying the game, and after about a dozen hours and dozens of runs, I'm here to tell you that despite a goofy first impression, there definitely is something to We Who Are About to Die. Okay, so that something comes with a bunch of asterisks. This game was made by a solo dev, and if the roadmap is anything to go by, then there's still a long ways to go till 1.0. In addition to all the items, modes, and events you'd expect any roguelike worth its salt to be adding during the early access period, it lacks a lot of those progression layers and modifiers that help incentivize long-term play, and even meta features like cloud saves and controller support aren't here yet either. So why am I breaking my early access virginity to play and cover this title now? It's because even in its current state, it really delivers on its core Colosseum fantasy. At the start of each run, you're given a gladiator with his own set of attributes, downsides, and even a variable win condition that's usually some variation of collecting X amount of currency or killing X amount of combatants. From here you engage with two primary gameplay systems, the first being a sort of meta management sim to ensure your gladiator is equipped and famous and accumulating money, but the second and most important is the actual arena combat, fueled by a physics-based melee system. This is the heart of the game, and this is what makes We Who Are About to Die such a thrilling experience. How exactly does it work? It gives you really minute control over how your gladiator moves their limbs, which translates to battle encounters where you effectively have unlimited options for attacks. You can click and drag your mouse near an enemy to swing at them. It's not so much drawing the path of your sword, but more so drawing the path of the arm wielding it, and that gives you a lot of choice. For starters, you can come in at an opponent from any angle, but you can also start a swing from one side and have it finish from the other to feint. There's also stabs, overheads, and a shove move to create distance. All of the above limited by a stamina meter that forces you to choose between your bevy of offensive options and your movement tools of sprinting and dodging. On the defensive side of things, you block by holding right click and pointing your cursor towards incoming attacks. The larger the item you're blocking with, the easier it is to ensure the hitboxes meet. In essence, parrying is no different than blocking with a shield. It's just that the smaller relative size of the sword makes it more challenging. I think the game's physics and control scheme are best represented by how throwing works. Throwing doesn't get its own button, it's actually just shared with your drop button. But rather than being a context-sensitive activation, it instead relies on the momentum of your arm. So to throw, all you do is line up a conventional swing, but then click the drop button when your arm is fully extended, and it will go flying. In essence, throwing is just dropping at high speed. That's pretty profound, isn't it? It's a lot to take in at first, especially if you haven't played any of the small handful of other games that utilize physics and momentum-based combat systems before, but it's worth that investment. When you land a kill, you really feel it. Each one is incredibly earned, and there's nothing quite like winning a 1vx engagement or securing a clutch double kill. It's this paradox where it feels completely unnatural at first, but ends up being completely natural when mastery is acquired. Big shields aren't advantageous because they have bigger block numbers, but instead because they have a wider area to catch blows. Spears aren't bad at close range because of damage penalties or modifiers, but because the pointy end needs room to be thrust. Battles will have you maneuvering into proper ranges, spacing yourself to minimize flanking opportunity, making mad dashes to pick up discarded weapons. It feels so great that my first session with the game, that was only supposed to be like an hour before bed, ended up spiraling into a red-eyed 3-hour binge that left me pantomiming the battles in my head as I drifted to sleep. The entire system is an achievement, and even if it's not wholly unique, it's very well executed here. When you're not battling, you're making decisions that will impact battles. You'll get a random selection of combats from which to choose next that can be 1v1s, free-for-alls, and team-based battles of varying group sizes. The game will also throw some modifiers on top of them too, such as weapons being unbreakable, or maybe you don't bring any equipment from outside the battle. Some of the most important choices here will involve how you're going to spend your winnings. There are actually a ton of ways to do so, and that might not all be to the game's benefit. Most of the systems here are really underbaked. The two primary currencies are fame and gold, both of which can be exchanged for each other at a reduced rate, or put towards upgrades, repairs, healing, items, betting, and more. Most of these mechanics don't even have a visual representation. You just go to the menu in between battles and you can just shift stuff around. There's barely any randomness to most of this too, making it feel less like a roguelike and more like something else entirely. The most egregious is the item and shop systems, particularly because of their balance. Each round you'll get a series of equipment to choose from with its own set of stats and a unique aesthetic. These items are aligned to different rarities and become more powerful the rarer they are. But the catch here is that rare items fetch more expensive costs. There's almost no excitement seeing a legendary pop into the shop because it'll have a legendary price tag that you almost certainly cannot afford for most of the game. Even non-rare items still cost a ton, all but the absolute weakest of gear is near unattainable. Maybe that's the point, and maybe it makes for good narrative to claw your way out of poverty gear, but the end result is that all of your gladiators feel really samey until the very late game, where powerful items will have you leading into different playstyles. When you consider that the items are where most of the variance comes between battles, and the fact that you can only seldom engage with them early because of their prohibitive costs, it really just pushes you towards spending your money in all of the other boring systems that are just variations of moving numbers around like you're an accountant. The in-between battle segments don't make me feel like a gladiator, they make me feel like the gladiator's agent. They stick out like a sore thumb, and I really hope that in the future, a lot of it gets simplified and emphasized on the few decisions that are really fun, like picking your bouts and the level up bonuses that are decisions between free perks. But that's really the only part of the game I out and out disliked. In fact, the early access label isn't even a marker of technical quality here. The game ran flawlessly for me. I had no crashes and didn't even experience any bugs, as long as you're not counting the liberal ways with which character models behave under pressure. The foundation that a single developer has been able to craft here is really great, and I think there's a ton of potential. I'd love to see how this control scheme could handle dual wielding. Take some of the combat log on the bottom left and give me the option to overlay my damage numbers somewhere more visible. Give me some other Colosseum staples like ferocious lions or even chariots. Hell, give me intro animations before a battle that highlights who my opponent is to make them more than just flesh and blood. Maybe even cycle some of my previously successful gladiators into that slot a la Wildermyth. There's already some primitive wrestling-like mechanics to this one that I think would integrate with that really well. Not in a grappler sense, but in a crowd-pleasing sense, where fame multipliers can happen if you keep your face exposed and don't use shields and swap out weapons mid-combat. This game lends itself to some pretty incredible spectacle, and more than anything I want to see that played up as time goes on. I want to feel like the crowd does when I see what challenge awaits me opposite the sand. If my video leaves you on the fence about this one, I'd say give its demo a shot. If the combat resonates with you, then its sins are easy to forgive. We Who Are About to Die is worthwhile because of how well it delivers on its full control combat fantasy, even if I think it tends to lean too hard into its bread and not enough into its circus.